Mornings on Horseback by David McCullough. Have you ever felt trapped by a weakness? Maybe it's a fear that keeps you up at night, a physical limitation that feels like a prison, or just this nagging sense that you're not built for the life you dream about. Now picture this, a young boy, so small and frail that some nights he literally can't breathe. His tiny body seizes up in violent attacks that leave him gasping for air. His father, this powerful, wealthy man, has to scoop him up in his arms and pace the floors for hours, trying to calm him. On the worst nights, he bundles his son into a carriage and races through the dark city streets, desperately hoping the rush of cold air will shock those failing lungs back to life. This boy is terrified of the dark, terrified of being alone. He's quiet, sickly, and painfully shy. The people around him whisper that he probably won't make it to adulthood. His name? Theodore Roosevelt. Yes, that Theodore Roosevelt, the man who became the living symbol of American toughness. The Rough Rider. The big game hunter. The president whose face ended up carved into Mount Rushmore. The question that pulses through every page of David McCullough's masterpiece Mornings on Horseback isn't just what happened, but how. How does a boy who struggles just to fill his lungs become the man who tells the world to speak softly and carry a big stick? How does weakness transform into an unstoppable force? This isn't just another presidential biography. It's a deep dive into the alchemy of character, how a remarkable family, a vanished way of life, and one life-changing conversation between father and son set everything in motion. David McCullough isn't just a historian. He's a master storyteller who spent years digging through thousands of private letters and diaries to uncover the real human being behind the legend. And what he discovered is a timeless lesson: our greatest struggles can become the source of our greatest strengths. So, for the next little while, forget everything you think you know about Theodore Roosevelt. Because by the end of our journey today, you'll not only understand how that fragile boy became a giant, you'll also discover how you can forge your own strength, no matter where you're starting from. This is the story of how a man is made. To really understand Theodore Roosevelt, you need to understand the two completely different worlds he was born into. These worlds were so opposed that they created a permanent tension inside him, a constant tug-of-war between duty and adventure, restraint and passion. His father's world was the world of the Roosevelts of New York. Picture New York in the mid-1800s. A city of elegant brownstones, gas-lit streets, and horse-drawn carriages. The Roosevelts were royalty in this world. Old money, Dutch aristocracy, a dynasty of wealthy merchants and bankers who'd been running things for generations. Their family name was synonymous with integrity, duty, and quiet, unshakable confidence. At the center of this world stood Theodore's father, Theodore Roosevelt Sr. To his family and the entire city, he was larger than life. Tall, handsome, with piercing blue eyes, he embodied everything a Victorian gentleman should be. But he was more than just appearances. This was a man of deep compassion. While his brothers focused on making money, Theodore Sr. dedicated himself to helping the city's most vulnerable. He founded orphanages, hospitals, museums. Sunday nights you'd find him not at some comfortable club, but in a lodging house for homeless newsboys, knowing each one by name, listening to their stories. His family called him Greatheart, after the hero in Pilgrim's Progress, the strong, fearless guide who protects the weak on their journey. To his own children, he was basically a god. The source of all authority, yes, but also their greatest companion. He taught them to ride, to climb trees, to live by a clear code. Cultivate hope, get action, seize the moment. Man was never meant to become an oyster. Lying in cowardice, unforgivable. But show courage, and you'd be rewarded dramatically. He was, as his son Eliot put it, the ideal father, a man made to govern and doing it so lightly and affectionately. This was the world of duty, of building things that last, of quiet strength and moral certainty. But then, there was his mother's world. Martha Bullock Roosevelt, everyone called her Mitty, was pure Southern belle, straight from Georgia, and she was as different from the Roosevelts as you could possibly imagine. Where the Roosevelts were solid and dependable, the Bullocks were spirited, romantic, and adventurous. Scottish blood ran through them, producing dashing soldiers, sea captains, and beautiful, stormy women. Mitty grew up on a Georgia plantation called Bullock Hall, and to her New York children, it sounded like something from a fairy tale. When she spoke in her soft Southern drawl, she didn't just tell stories, she conjured a lost world. A world of endless picnics and riding parties, of heroes and duels. Her half-brother James Bullock was a legendary Confederate agent who built the infamous raider ship, the Alabama. Her younger brother, Irvine, served on that ship and supposedly fired its last shot. Her stories overflowed with daring adventures, bear hunts, and heroic ancestors who fought in the Revolution. For young Theodore, or TD, as the family called him, these tales were pure magic. His first taste of a life of high adventure lived far from the safe, orderly streets of New York. So here's this boy, caught between two powerful currents. From his father, he inherited a deep sense of duty, a moral compass that would guide him forever. From his mother, he got a wild, romantic imagination and a burning hunger for action and glory. The problem? His own body seemed determined to betray both worlds. Theodore Roosevelt the boy was a walking contradiction, born into a family bursting with vitality, yet chronically, terrifyingly ill. From age 3, brutal asthma attacks tortured him. It's hard for us today to grasp just how frightening this was. We're not talking about a little wheezing. These were violent seizures that struck in the middle of the night, leaving him gasping for air, his small body rigid with terror, feeling like he was being strangled. The attacks could last for hours, and there was basically nothing anyone could do. The family tried everything. Doctors prescribed a horrifying array of remedies. To shock his system, his parents made him drink black coffee and whiskey, or even forced him to smoke cigars, hoping the nausea would somehow bring relief. His father, Greatheart, would hold him, walk with him, or race him through the city in the carriage. The entire household revolved around TD's fragile health. Summer plans got canceled. Dinner parties cut short. The family lived in constant gnawing anxiety that an attack could strike any moment. But asthma wasn't his only problem. Stomach trouble plagued him, crippling headaches, constant colds. He was small for his age, with bad color, and what his mother described as a, quote, quiet patrician air, his eyes not looking at anything present. He was also painfully nearsighted, but incredibly, no one, not even his parents, realized it for years. To him, the world beyond a few feet was just a blur. This physical frailty bred deep fear and inadequacy. He was timid, often alone, and a world away from the heroes in his mother's stories or the powerful man he worshipped as his father. His younger brother Elliot overshadowed him, bigger, stronger, a natural athlete. He found escape in books and nature. He started his own Roosevelt Museum of Natural History in an upstairs hallway, collecting birds, mice, insects, anything he could find. He taught himself taxidermy, filling his room with the smell of arsenic and preserving chemicals. This was his private kingdom, where he could be master, where he could study and catalog and bring order to a life that often felt chaotic and beyond his control. But it was lonely. His health kept him from school, so his only playmates were his siblings and a few carefully chosen cousins. He was watching life from the sidelines, trapped in a body that refused to cooperate. This is the boy we see right before everything changes. A boy with a brilliant, curious mind and powerful imagination, but imprisoned by fear and physical weakness. He had the heart of a lion but the lungs of a mouse. And then came the moment that changed everything. He was about 12 years old. His health, if anything, was getting worse. The family had just returned from a year-long European trip that was supposed to cure him, but only made things more miserable. The attacks came so frequently now that his father was exhausted and near despair. "It used me up entirely to have another attack come so soon after the last," his father wrote privately. One day, his father called him into his study. He looked at his son, not with pity, but with solemn purpose, and he laid down a challenge. "Theodore," he said, "you have the mind, but you have not the body. And without the help of the body, the mind cannot go as far as it should." He told his son he had to build himself up through his own effort, his own will. "You must make your body." Imagine hearing those words from the man you worship above all others. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a summons. A declaration of faith, not in who T.D. was, but in who he could become. His father was handing him the key to his own prison. And something shifted inside the boy right then. The story goes that he threw his head back and declared, "I will do it." He would make his body. And so began the long, slow, often painful process of Theodore Roosevelt's reinvention. It started with a gymnasium his father built for him on the back piazza of their house. Day after day, he forced his scrawny body through a grueling, monotonous routine. His sisters remembered watching him, this tiny, determined figure, straining between the horizontal bars, his face grim with effort. Drudgery indeed, they called it. For months, progress was almost invisible. He stayed undersized, all stick arms and legs, but he never stopped. Driven by his father's words, and by deep, burning shame when he read about heroes in books, he realized admiring them wasn't enough. He had to become like them, and strength had to come first. Then came two discoveries that changed his world. First, a pair of thick spectacles. At 13, after years of squinting at a blurry world, he was finally diagnosed with severe myopia. When he put those glasses on for the first time, it was, in his own words, like an entirely new world opened to him. He could see individual leaves on trees, details on a bird's wing, expressions on people's faces. For the first time, he could see the world with the same clarity that had always existed in his mind. It was a revelation. The second discovery was his father's gift of a shotgun. Now he could not only see the birds he loved, he could hunt them. He could actually participate in the natural world, not just observe it. These two things, glasses and gun, unlocked the door to the wilderness, and it was in the wilderness that he truly began forging his new self. The family took a trip to the Adirondacks, and for the first time, T.D. could rough it in the bush, hiking for miles, feeling the thrill of the wild. His asthma for a time disappeared. A few years later, the family embarked on another journey, this time spending winter on the Nile River in Egypt. For T.D., it was paradise. Day after day, he and his father set out with their guns, tramping the shores of the great river. He was no longer the sickly boy confined to his room. He was a hunter, a naturalist, a budding man of action. He was Natty Bumppo on the Nile. The sun, the dry air, the constant physical exertion. It was all-powerful medicine. His health improved dramatically. But the most important part of this transformation was internal. He was learning that he could push his body past its limits. That discipline and willpower could overcome physical weakness. He was, slowly but surely, making his body. Then, just as he was beginning to find his strength, the center of his world collapsed. He was at Harvard in his sophomore year, thriving. His health had never been better. He was popular, excelling in his studies, and falling in love for the first time. He was finally becoming the kind of man his father would be proud of. And then, in February 1878, Theodore Roosevelt Sr., Greatheart, died. He was only 46. Sudden, vicious stomach cancer. The loss was catastrophic. "He was the best man I ever knew," Theodore wrote in his diary. "I owe everything to him." The grief was overwhelming. For months he was lost in a dark fog of sorrow and self-reproach. He felt he'd failed his father during that final illness, that he'd done nothing for the man who'd done everything for him. "Oh, Father, Father," he wrote, "how bitterly I miss you, mourn you, and long for you." His father's death was the great tragedy of his young life, but it was also the final, crucial step in becoming a man. The God of his childhood was gone. That external source of strength and guidance had been taken away. Now he had to find that strength entirely within himself. He had to become his own great heart. He poured his grief and restless energy into work and a furious regimen of physical activity: boxing, wrestling, punishing hikes. He was determined to live the life his father would have wished for him. He graduated Harvard with honors, married his first love, the beautiful Alice Hathaway Lee, and entered politics, running for the New York State Assembly at 23. He was a whirlwind of energy, a crusading reformer taking on corrupt political machines with joyful ferocity. He was living a golden life, successful, happily married, about to become a father. And then fate struck again, with almost incomprehensible cruelty. On February 12, 1884, Alice gave birth to their first child, a daughter. Theodore was in Albany and received a telegram with the happy news. But hours later, a second telegram arrived, and he rushed back to New York. He arrived at the family home on 57th Street to find the house shrouded in nightmarish gloom. His younger brother Elliot met him at the door. "There is a curse on this house," Elliot said. "Mother is dying, and Alice is dying too." In the same house, on the same day, both his mother, Mitty, and his young wife, Alice, were slipping away. Mitty from typhoid fever, Alice from sudden severe kidney disease that had gone undetected during her pregnancy. For hours, Theodore sat by Alice's bedside, holding her as she faded in and out of consciousness. He was called to his mother's room just before she died, in the early morning hours of February 14th. Then he returned to Alice. She died in his arms that afternoon. She'd been his wife for just over 3 years. She was 22. In his diary, on that date, he drew a large black X and wrote, "The light has gone out of my life." He'd lost his father, his mother, and his wife, all within 6 years. He was 25 years old, a widower, and a father to a child he could barely bring himself to look at. The pain was unbearable, so he did the only thing he knew how to do. He ran. He ran from New York, from politics, from his family, from his own grief. He ran to the one place that felt as desolate and empty as his own heart: the Dakota Badlands. He'd invested in a cattle ranch there a year earlier, partly for adventure, partly as business. But now it became his sanctuary, his escape. He threw himself into the harshest, most demanding life he could find. He wanted, as he wrote, to work until he was so physically exhausted that he couldn't think. This was the final crucible. The Badlands in the 1880s were the very edge of the American frontier, raw, wild, and often violent. He worked alongside his cowboys, sharing their food, their hardships, their dangers. He rode for days on end, sleeping on the ground, his face burned by the sun and cut by the wind. This was no gentleman's holiday. This was a battle for survival, both physical and spiritual. He was on the spring roundup, riding 18 hours a day, wrestling calves for branding, his body caked in dirt and sweat. A horse threw him and broke a rib. Another fell on him and broke his shoulder. He never complained, just kept going. One night, during a lightning storm, the herd stampeded. In the pitch-black chaos, he galloped blindly beside the terrified cattle, his horse plunging into the freezing, quicksand-filled Little Missouri River. He was in the saddle for nearly 40 hours straight. He was no longer making his body. He was testing it, pushing it to its absolute breaking point. And in doing so, he was healing his soul. That caged wolf feeling, the restless, anxious energy that had plagued him his whole life, began to fade. The vastness and silence of the prairie soothed him. He hunted elk, bighorn sheep, and finally a grizzly bear, which he faced down and killed at 20 feet. And he had one final adventure. 3 thieves stole his boat, and he, along with 2 of his men, tracked them for days down the frozen river. He captured them at gunpoint and, instead of hanging them, as was frontier custom, marched them 45 miles overland, on foot, through a blizzard, to bring them to justice. He read Anna Karenina along the way. When he finally emerged from that wilderness, he was a different man. The transformation was complete. He was, as one of his men said, clear bone, muscle, and grit. The asthmatic boy was gone forever. In his place stood the man the world would come to know. He'd gone west, seeking oblivion, a way to bury his sorrow. Instead, he found himself. He discovered a core of strength he never knew he had, a resilience forged in the fires of unimaginable loss and brutal physical hardship. He returned to New York, to his family, to his infant daughter, to politics. He would remarry, have more children, build a new life. The road ahead would lead to the governor's mansion, the White House, and a place in history. But it was all built on the foundation laid in those early years. Built on the memory of a father who taught him the meaning of strength, a mother who filled his mind with dreams of glory, and the terrible, beautiful crucible of the West that turned a broken young man into Theodore Roosevelt. When you finish a book, like Mornings on Horseback, you're left with this feeling that's both inspiring and a little intimidating. The sheer scale of Theodore Roosevelt's transformation seems almost mythical, like a superhero origin story. And it's easy to think, well, that was him, he was a Roosevelt. He had wealth, connections, a one-of-a-kind father. What does his story have to do with me? And I think that's where the deepest lesson of this book lies. Because David McCullough's great achievement is demystifying the myth. He shows us Roosevelt wasn't born a force of nature. He was forged. And the tools he used to forge himself are available to every single one of us. The central idea, the one that echoes long after you finish reading, is that our greatest weaknesses aren't just obstacles to overcome. They can become the very source of our greatest strengths. Think about it. Roosevelt's asthma was a curse, terrifying, debilitating, isolating. But what did it teach him? It taught him, from his earliest moments, that life is a fight. It taught him the value of a single, clean breath. It gave him an almost desperate appreciation for the outdoors, for vigorous life, for the feeling of air filling his lungs. His struggle for physical survival created a psychological blueprint for every other struggle he'd face. He learned to fight because he had to fight just to breathe. His poor eyesight, another weakness, forced him inward, made him a reader, a scholar. It developed his mind long before he could develop his body. When he finally put on those glasses, that powerful mind was unleashed on a world he was seeing with fresh eyes, full of wonder and detail. And his devastating grief, losing his father, mother, and wife, could have broken him. For many people, it would have been the end of their story. But for him, it became fuel for his final transformation. He took his pain to the one place where it could be burned away by hardship and exhaustion: the frontier. What Roosevelt's story teaches us is that character isn't a gift, it's a choice. It's a series of choices, made day after day. The choice to get up and go to the gymnasium when every part of his body ached. The choice to face his fears, whether it was a grizzly bear or a corrupt politician. The choice to take responsibility for his own making. His father's words, "You must make your body," are the key. That idea extends to everything. You must make your mind. You must make your character. You must make your life. No one's going to do it for you. So how can we apply this? It's simpler than you might think. First, identify your own asthma. What's the weakness, the fear, the limitation you feel is holding you back? Don't run from it. Don't hide it. Look at it squarely and understand it. Because that's your raw material. That's the block of marble from which you'll carve your strength. Second, build your gymnasium. Find a small, daily, deliberate practice that pushes against that weakness. If you're timid, practice speaking up once a day. If you're disorganized, practice planning your day for 10 minutes every morning. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Roosevelt's transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened through thousands of small, boring, repetitive actions. It's the drudgery, as his father said, that makes the man. And finally, seek out your badlands. Find a challenge that takes you completely out of your comfort zone. It doesn't have to be a cattle ranch. Could be joining a club, learning a new skill, traveling somewhere new, or taking on a project that terrifies you. The goal is to put yourself in a situation where you have no choice but to rely on your own resources, to test your limits, and to discover the strength you never knew you had. The story of Theodore Roosevelt isn't about a man destined for greatness. It's about a boy who chose it. He chose to fight. He chose to build. He chose to turn his suffering into his power. And in doing so, he left us with a powerful and timeless truth. The life you want isn't something you find. It's something you make. That was a summary of Mornings on Horseback by David McCullough. We've touched on the major themes and stories today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary like this is like looking at a photograph of the Grand Canyon. You can see the shape of it, get a sense of its scale, but you can't feel the wind, can't hear the silence, can't experience the awe of standing on the edge yourself. The real magic of this book is in McCullough's incredible prose and the way he brings this family and their world to life. If anything we've talked about today has sparked something in you, I truly hope you'll pick up a copy. It's more than just a history book. It's a profound meditation on character, family, and the making of a man. An experience that might just change the way you see your own struggles. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and maybe leave a comment. It lets us know we're on the right track and helps us bring more of these incredible stories from the billionaire's bookshelf to you. Let's keep growing together.